Hey, what's up, Liron here. Today we're going to learn how to paint a beautiful alpine cabin with emphasis on creating a sense of depth using watercolors' unique ability to be painted wet and wet or in a very smooth way. I think if you're struggling with creating a strong focal point, you'll find this one really useful. This is another video based on an old live stream. As I am on vacation, this was a good way for me to make sure you have some content. Cut out all the fluff. It's just a painting process. Let's get to it. So I'm going to start with the thing that I like the most in this reference photo, which is the roof. And here's how I think of approaching it. I'm going to take an inside-out approach again, meaning I'm going to start with this beautiful rusty kind of paint, and then work my way to anything that's connected with it. So for example, this wall, and then this wall is connected by a shadow, and this wall is connected, and all of these details are connected, and then this wall stays white because it's really in the light, and so on and so forth. Okay, and we're gonna start small with a small shape and see how we can build it up. I am gonna take my time and make sure that I mix something that I like and that looks like it could work. So let's see here. It's gonna be a fairly strong orange. With that being the focal point, I do want it to show. So I'm not gonna mute it as much probably as in the reference photo, and you can always mute it, but it's going to be very hard to get it to be as bright. So I think that's good. Maybe even a little too crazy. Let me try and mute it and see what my thoughts are. And then if I add a bit more red, you know what, that's really nice actually. So we'll go with that. We'll go with that, just a tiny bit of blue. Now here's something fun. I want us to tackle, it's a pretty light area, pretty light wash. But I want us to paint even the shadows directly. Okay, I want us to try and paint the shadows in directly in the first go. So we'll see how it goes. But let me show you. If you start small, from this small area, something like this, then you get some time to think and plan how you want to approach this. And you see there's a bit of a highlight here that I'm going to maintain and paint over on the other side. Now I don't want these to necessarily be two separate shapes completely, so a fun thing to do is to maybe allow them to mix in some spots, kind of leave a small highlight. Well, let me add a bit more red to this, like so, and I'm just going to start building that rooftop. I really enjoy painting like this from, again, inside out, with not a lot of necessarily rhyme or reason in my work order, because I find that spontaneity can be good sometimes. It's good training wheels too, to kind of know how to not be bound by a process that only includes a first wash that's an underpainting, and then another wash, and then, you know, kind of like a robot, which sometimes people may feel like that, and I have heard from people who say that. So don't be a painting robot. Start your washes however you wish, right? That's the point here. And maybe you don't want to just work the same kind of way always, right? Now this is actually another roof, so we can kind of connect the two. So here's how I do this. If the color and value are similar enough, and even if just the value is similar enough, I'm going to connect. And I'm going to keep it simple for myself. Now let's add some more paint, some more yellow, some more blue, just to mute it a little bit. Hopefully you can see everything. And I will look at some more of your chat messages soon, okay? It's not the end of me looking at them. But look at how much, when you just work on that, kind of gives you time to explore and let things happen. And you don't have to be too stressed about anything, really. Kind of let things happen on paper, look at them. Is this missing some red? Is it missing something else, right? Now, as I move forward with this, I'm going to start working on that wall that's facing towards us. Now, I don't want to go there with a super blue strong color. We're going to go more for a muted for now. And in fact, I think I'm going to start warm and then cool it up as we move. So let me see what we have here. That's kind of a nice warm. I think we can work with that. Give it a spray of water just to keep things moving a bit. And look at what I'm doing. I'm just connecting it directly. There's a lot of simplicity in doing something like that. And as we get down to this point, I'm going to increase the blue. And just go ahead and blue it up. See? And I'm going to blue up that cast shadow here. Or, yeah, it's a cast shadow, I think. Over the window, inside the window, whatever that is. Down on the wall. All the way down, we can actually paint all the way down because this fence thing is going to be darker later on. And that's kind of just directly, right? And then we have this wall. Now here I can crank up the coolness a bit more. So I just don't want it to be like a strong ultramarine. I want it to be something else. So a bit more blue, but not fully. And look at what we're going to do here. In fact, let me strengthen this a bit more. We need more. That's going to work. And then I'm going to connect it directly to the roof. Even though some parts have already started to dry, we're perfectly fine with that. Paint over that window. It has no real significance here. Now look at this edge. Right here, that's a really fun one because you can see the pattern of the rocks. So you can use that to your advantage to convey that these are indeed rocks and it's an uneven structure in a way. Then we're going to move all the way back to this wall. Now look at what I'm going to do here. I'm going to increase the blue saturation, but it's not going to be much darker. It's just going to be a bit of a stronger blue here. Now, the advantage of working like this one shape is once we get to the grass here, we can just start mixing. So let's mix a fairly dark green. Something like that should work. And then we'll push it slowly to be darker using wet and wet. For now, let's start with this. Actually, let's put some more value in there. And a bit of red will help darken it even more. And a bit more blue and a bit more yellow. And that's pretty much as dark as we'll go, I think, in this painting. And here we have the opportunity to kind of carve out the shape, the pattern of the grass, right? And this is going to be green too, right? But I'm just kind of getting started here. And we can put in that kind of a group of bushes, trees, whatever is there. Vary it up a bit because this is close to the focal point. So let's grab a bit of yellow here and just put it over like that. And as we move down, a rather simplistic approach to foliage, but I find it to be very effective. We're going to bring in some more strength. A bit of red I'm missing here. Notice how green this is. And I need it to turn into a shadow. It's a little more neutral. And between them as well, there's quite a bit of shadows. And that should do the trick. Something like that. And there's even this shadow in the rocks here that we can kind of continue off of the edge of the bush. So I'm just kind of expanding the shape outwards, if that makes sense. And that's pretty much what I'm going for here. This rock. And we can put in the grass later on. Okay, and now that little nice chimney, fairly muted kind of a bluish thing. And look at how I'm using everything on my palette. I'm not scared to really dip into different areas and make sure I make use of them, make use of the paint. There we go. And I'm gonna get the darker areas with a bit of red and blue together. Kind of put in those heavy shadows, and look at how slowly the picture comes to life. And that's kind of how I aspire for my painting processes to look like. They slowly come together. It doesn't have to be immediate. In fact, usually it will take some time. And thank you so much once again to everyone who's here. If you can take a moment and leave a like on the stream, that helps me a lot to get to more people. We're gonna let this area dry and then we'll add this shadow and everything. When you paint this way, it's so fast, you know, it just things happen fast, which is a fun advantage of this method. You see things immediately. Now, one thing I want to fill in there is this area behind the shadow under the roof. So we'll get that done, and then I'm gonna look at some of the chat. I've been neglecting it. And I think I'll rotate. So here's something that's often fun doing. You can get the shape more accurately on the first go by rotating, then bringing it back. Now the tough part, what we've been doing so far isn't even that hard. The tough part would be how do we balance it with a background and with the rest of the details to make this look fun and believable and good looking. That's gonna be our challenge. There we go. And this in theory connects to a shadow that runs through here. So let's put a hint of that. Let's make this a little thinner. So let's get a bit of stronger paint up here. Don't be afraid to revisit areas, it's all good. And look at how much work that contrast does for us in this painting. That's pretty much all it relies on. So next step is going to be to add the background. So let's get to it. Don't let the blue of the sky mislead you. It's going to be blue, but it's going to be quite weak. That's what I think it's going to be. And here we can do this, okay? Don't take a bet if you don't have to. Just test things out. Sorry for moving the camera. Hopefully that's not too terrible. Test it out. So go ahead, put a blue. And what does this look like in comparison, right? Maybe we'll start a little more blue, and that's going to be the neutral underneath it. That works really well. So we're going to go with that. And I'm going to start here with, you see, because I had something there, it's not a perfect blue, and that's actually good. So I'm going to use some of these mixes to create neutral blues and see which one I like the most. I kind of like using everything on my palette, especially in this stage with the muted colors. So now I like this much more than this. This I don't like. It's something I don't want. So it looks like we're going to need a cleaner blue, but a lighter too. So light is good because it means we don't need to mix as much paint, and I think that should work. So I'm actually going to start with a bit of pure and treat this the same way you would any other shape we painted so far. No pressure. Start small, take a look at it. Does it look good? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Kind of work your way around it. So look at what I'm going to do here. I'm painting down under the mountains, and then I can come back with a bit of blue and go ahead and just put that in. No pressure whatsoever. Can use this to get a bit of a better angle. Now, for the mountains, I want them mainly to be gray. I want them to be neutral. That's a purple. Let's add a bit of yellow. I don't want these mountains to stick out at all. So let's add a bit of everything. And we're good. We still have a bead. It's going to work out. Now let's see if we can mute and neutralize, create a good neutral color. If we can't, I'm just going to use neutral tint. Just going to fall back on some neutral tint. But I think we're close. I feel like I'm going to fail in mixing it right here. Actually, okay, that's better. Let's add a bit of neutral tint. See if it neutralizes it even more. Why not? Why work hard? And then this starts from neutral. And because we painted over, down, under the mountains, we're going to get a smooth edge here, which is good for us. It's going to help us maintain our focal point. And I think if we really want to keep the foreground in the foreground and not have it pop too, and not have anything, you know, overcrowded or beat it, that's actually a good way of painting almost everything in the background. So you see I'm not changing, but I'm making my plans on the fly, but still while understanding I have time. If you're worried that you won't have time and you work really fast and haphazardly, you're gonna mess things up. So try and give yourself that confidence boost. Use enough water, keep things fairly flowing. Now as we move down, I can start putting a bit more blue actually, because blue is better than gray. It's going to be a little more saturated. And now we're just working our way as if this is a shape. It's just one big shape behind our cabin. Okay? Now look at how all the highlights of the cabin are just going to fall into place. Now this side is pretty much done. Let's do this. Wrap it up like that. And that's going to be the end of this side of the wash. Kind of like this. And then this side, we're going to start slowly adding a bit of yellow to green it up. Okay? But we want to go a little slow, so it's still quite a muted green. See how I'm coming all the way around to make sure that Ruth came back from her walk. I'm coming all the way from around so that I can draw this line a little more carefully. It's not an easy one, and you can feel free, of course, at home to rotate if you have to. And I'm going to treat this whole background as very abstract. So a bit more yellow here. Like that. And be careful, if areas started to dry up above, don't revisit them too much. I'm actually going to blue it up a bit back. Just a bit more blue. Looked a little too strong. And then we're going to work our way. Look at what I'm doing here. Fearlessly over that tree from earlier. Don't worry about it. In fact, I would go over all of this like that. We'll put in that little fence or whatever later. Okay? And this brings us all the way down to here. Now, this does get a bit dark around the bottom. You can work with that or you can kind of ignore it. Question is, do you want to create a contrast here? I would argue we're good and we don't need it. But that may be a mistake. That may be a mistake. I'm not sure, honestly. We'll have to kind of play by ear here. Now look at how this gave some meaning to our highlights, right? Now they're not just white with tons of white around. This actually starts to shine a bit, right? Now, I'm going to get rid of a point that kind of, it's time to get rid of. This should be a blue, darker blue at that. And I wanted to do this from before. There we go. So next up, let's address this area here of the grass. So I want this to be a little more yellow. I actually want this to have a yellow base. I have light on my face, that's nice. A bit of a yellower base here. So, because we're missing a bit of yellow, but that's way too strong. So let's try and add a bit of yellow ochre to that. You kind of tone it down a bit. See, that golden paint is really, really nice. And then what we can do is, in some spots, we can go with a combination of that and a bit more green in some spots. Okay, so let me mix a mix of these two colors: Indian yellow, yellow ochre. Let's see here. Do I want a bit of red in there? I don't think so. We can start light and then kind of build our way. Add some stuff here. But once I finish that area, we're gonna go back to the chat before I add some final details to the cabin. We're actually really close to finishing this. Not a lot more work to do. So let's see what we can achieve here. And that may be too strong. I'm not sure. Let's see what we get. I do think I should start pushing it towards a bit more of a green here. Like that. And then let's go back to some of our yellows. And as we get to this area, add just a bit of blue. I want to be gentle with this kind of a mix here. Get rid of all these excessive highlights. That actually works really well for me, I think. So that's that. And let's cover this with green. I think that's good. All of this, actually. And we'll kind of let it sit. We can start putting in these shadows wet and wet. Let me see how wet that is. So I kind of made up a shadow and we can work with that. I just want to make sure this shadow is not like blue or, you know, I just want it to be a little more subtle. So let me think for a few seconds. I'm gonna do this partially wet and wet. Let's try this out. I think it should be wet enough. Like this. So the shadow kind of complements the grass color. Maybe a bit of blue in it too. It's more of a compositional thing rather than an actual shadow that's important because I see it in the reference photo. I just want to frame down that lower part of the scene. Frame it a little better. And because the shadow looks vastly different in the reference photo, right? Then it has this part like that. Downhill. And let's put a bit of a stronger mark. Like that. Something like this. Now let's let this dry and see where we're at, okay? So we'll continue. We're marching forward and we'll start adding some shadows here. Now, here's the key. I want these shadows to be very muted, so I'm gonna cop out and use my neutral tint. I don't want them to be blue because I'm kind of sick of blue shadows in my paintings. They're always too much in abundance. I don't need them. And by the way, because we did our test paper routine, we can test it out over this. See, and we can know what it's gonna look like. So that's useful. And I think we got a pretty nice match here. So mixing, right? And I don't talk much about mixing, but you have to make sure you mix it the right value, the right temperature or color. So I know what I want in terms of color, but this is too light. This is not gonna show as a shadow. So I have to strengthen it, right? With a bit more. And a bit more. And I think this should be good. Okay, now there's a pretty big shadow, and I'm gonna just move this so I can see the reference photo. There we go. Pretty big shadow here. So let's test it out a bit. I'm gonna put this here, and it's a little diagonal. And follow what I'm doing here. I'm gonna do this, and I'm moving my hand left and right just a bit to make the shadow uneven, because there's a bit of a waviness to this thing that casts these, you know, metal pieces for the roof or whatever that is that casts the shadow has some unevenness to it. So we're having an uneven edge like so. And then we're gonna do this because I used the side of the brush. I got a bit of an uneven patchy wash there, but that's fine. Now I'm wondering, do I want to blue it just a bit? Let's add just a touch of ultramarine. I think it'll be better. Add the shadow, do the whole wavy edge, and look at what's gonna happen now. And that's one of the coolest moments of the painting process, I think. Now, the shapes, the highlights are gonna make sense. Because right now they're like, why is there a highlight? Once you put the cast shadow next to it, you know that the highlight is there because there's something beveled outside that casts the shadow. Plus, it's a nice contrast. The light next to dark or darker. And that can really make a painting look good. And then we have something here that casts a shadow. This rope thing. So why not put that in? Maybe keep it a little more uneven. Like that. And then continue. March forward. And we do have a bit of that kind of shadow in between these two roofs, but I will keep most of them, I think, or some of them at least, connected. Now this may look a little strong, but it's actually going to dry a little weaker, so we're good. But I'm gonna, let's see here. let's mix the same kind of a thing. Maybe because I added the blue, it went a little too dark. So I'm gonna try and make it a little lighter as it moves to the right. Even though it may be good, it may be good. But let's see. Now this bottom part where I really forgot, I should have added that dark spot down at the bottom. That would have really improved things. So, but I already have not, so we're gonna have to do it wet on dry, not wet and wet, as I could have done it. Now look at what I'm doing here. I'm gonna get rid of these small shadows real fast, and then we're gonna put that cast shadow that has to follow the form of the roof. It goes up and then down and then up above the white parts and then back down. And I'm doing this while these shadows are still wet. See? Like that. Because that looks better, I think. And then, do we have another shadow from looking at the reference photo? I think that's pretty much it. I will say that this is a little darker here. There's a bit of a little darker area. And we're good. Now I'm going to add a bit of darkness below the rooftops. Just here. This white area should not be here, like that. And then we're going to connect a bit of a shadow here. The shadows are very mild on this lower, smaller rooftop, so I'm not going to indicate much of it. It's going to be this. And there's a bit of a, what you call the drain pipe thing. Let's keep this part a little more abstract. And then look at what I'm going to do. So I'm going to use some water, help this paint move down a bit, and use this opportunity to put in a very, putting a bit of yellow in my neutral tint. And I'm going to put the window yellow because it looks a little warm, the window itself. I'm going to put the window wet, and that'll keep it a little more, less intrusive, and a little more vague. I think that looks really good. Kind of like that. I'm not going to be tempted to darken all of this here. This is going to stay as it is for now. And I hope that makes sense. I kind of botched some of the shapes of the shadows, but I think it works. And then we actually have a small reddish touch under that part that I painted earlier. So let's see, because I feel like that's missing. I'm going to show you in just a second where. We're going to need a bit of yellow and red. And then right here, I feel like there's a bit of a redness to it. Like that. And then the windows themselves are also quite orange, but a bit darker. So let's do those. Actually, let's go stronger. More red, more yellow. Let's take a bet here. Make a bet. Like this. That works. That looks good. Then we have this window here. Let's darken the inside, but keep it still quite vague. Now you see the shapes start to fall into place, right? Now what I am missing is this. I totally missed that highlight. Kind of painted over it. We're gonna fix that in just 1 second. Let's see if it works out, because I do want to bring back that highlight here. I could lift, but I don't know if that's gonna be a good idea. You know, let's try lifting a bit, because it's not fully white. Let's try lifting, and then we can also try blending a bit. My instincts tell me not to lift. Let's not lift. I want to try something though. What happens if I soften some of these? Not sure. We'll keep them. I'm gonna use the opaque paint for this. And now's the moment to just take your time, not worry too much. You've done most of the hard work. All you really have to do is add the details, believe it's going to work, push some things to be darker, push some things to be lighter if you need to. And believe in yourself. The cliche is true. It's actually really important. There we go. Now this may dry too light. I mean too dark, actually. Because when you use opaque paint to lighten things up, once it dries it can look quite dark again. Because the paint goes more transparent. We'll see. We'll see about that. But I actually really like the gray. There is a bit of rust on the rooftop that I could just go ahead and put a bit of this same paint in. Let's see what it looks like. I just put some of it like this. I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't ruin it or anything, but there's no need to. So let me grab a bit of neutral tint once again. I'm going to add a bit of yellow ochre to it. I'm going to add a bit of blue. So essentially we're creating a gray, muted gray-green. And we need to keep this fairly light. You know what, should I just drop this? No, I'm going to put it. It's an interesting and important shadow that I do want to make use of. So here's the trick though. I want to make sure I leave enough, because I really like this transition. So we need to make sure we don't lose all of that. So let's flatten that shadow down to here. Something like that. Then just get the pattern of grass and leaves and blades on it. So I'm just going to use my tiny rigger brush. Just kind of same mix of paint. And get some edges to that shape. Right? How do you convey texture? By the edges of the shape. And it's something I talk about quite a bit. Not by drawing each and every grass blade, but rather this. And then we can start maybe adding a bit of some darker spots to it, and then it will just feed into the wet areas. And that will help us kind of stabilize that wonky form I put in here. Actually, there's a way to stabilize it. I see it now. There's a drain pipe, and it goes in, and then it actually turns into a highlight, which we'll add in just a second. So just to kind of balance out that. I don't know what I was thinking when I did that shape. I was completely distracted by something else, I think. That was a serious screw up. But the question is, if I bring this over from here, will it fix that? I don't know. I do not know, but I think it's a little better now. Now, one thing I will mention is when you work this kind of an approach, you're more prone to having these, you know, white areas and white kind of things left. So you have to pay attention and be a little more careful than I was. And you can fix them. Like I can go back now and use that similar mix of red and yellow, kind of mix something similar, a bit of blue. And I can probably fill in the blanks, so to speak, kind of like that. Get rid of some of these unnecessary highlights, you know. Just be a little more careful about things, like that, right? But just know that you're more prone to getting these if you're working in shapes. But I like a part of it that's the spontaneity of it. I really, really like. So let's add this railing. Now here's the key for me. I really like the way this area looks, so I don't want to overwork it. I don't want to go too dark here. So let's preserve the beauty we have and not go overboard. Sorry, it got quite dark. So I'm going to use a mix of all colors, really, a bit of neutral tint, a bit of red, a bit of blue to kind of mix in neutral. And then I'll see in which direction I think that's good. And here's the magic. I'm going to paint it in one go. So no wasting time. then I believe, yeah, there's a bit of that here. And that's, I think, a good kind of, I think it goes even more to the right here. Or maybe something like that. That's a good way of kind of closing off that area. And just kind of making it clear there's a structure here, you know, people live here, whatever. It's a beautiful balcony. And I think that's good. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts below. If you have any questions, leave a like, subscribe, and I want to thank everyone who supports me over on Patreon. You allow me to do the thing I do as a job. You give me a lot of confidence in that, so thank you so much. Be sure to check it out. Link in the description box if you want to receive credit at the end of these videos. And yeah, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again real soon. Till next time.